It
I
was
was
the early
completely trapped in
90s
that
when I
closet.
landed a
He
job
just
at a
kept coming
small
closer and I
distribution
didn't know what to
company in
do.
Ohio.
I really
I was
thought I wasn't gonna get
24,
out.
fresh out of college, and just grateful to be getting a paycheck. The economy was sluggish, and steady work felt like winning the lottery.
Her
The
smile
office
was
sat
haunted,
in one of those
a farewell
industrial
I wouldn't
parks that
understand
buzz
until
with
later.
trucks and forklifts all
The
day,
storm mirrored the
then
dread
turn into
rising
an
in my
empty,
gut.
echoing wasteland the moment the sun goes down. And because it really was the early 90s, we were cut off in a way that's hard to describe now. No smartphones, no GPS on vehicles, no social media to check when someone was last
I don't
active.
pay you to sit here
If
and
someone
cry.
didn't pick
I
up their
pay you to do your
landline, they
job.
just
Now
didn't
get
pick
back
up.
to work,
You
or
had
you
no
are
idea
finished.
where they were. Looking back, that isolation is what scares me the most. The company had maybe 15 employees total. The owner was a man named Mr. J. Sometimes people called him Mr. J. He was in his late 40s, heavyset, always squeezed into cheap suits that smelled like stale tobacco and breath mints. He wasn't openly aggressive, but something about him raised the hair on your arms. He was too quiet. He walked on the balls of his feet, so you never heard him until he was suddenly right behind your chair. Tiffany was our receptionist and administrative assistant. She was 22, bubbly, and kind to everyone. She was my first real friend there. We'd eat lunch in her Honda Civic or sit on the curb behind the warehouse if the weather was decent. We talked about normal stuff, music, movies, how much we loathed the filing system. About 6 months in, our conversations shifted. I started noticing how often Mr. J was around Tiffany. Not just a little too much, obsessively. Our office was mostly open plan, but Tiffany's desk sat a bit apart by the front entrance. Jay's office was all the way in back. Even so, he spent half his day loitering at the front desk. He'd lean over her shoulder to check the schedule, his face way too close to hers. I'd catch him standing in his doorway, just watching her type. It wasn't a casual glance. It was a fixed, unblinking stare that made my stomach turn even from across the room. One Tuesday in November, Tiffany asked if I wanted to grab a burger after work. She looked pale and her hands shook when she lifted her soda. "Is everything okay?" I asked once we were in the booth. She scanned the diner like she was afraid someone was listening. "It's Jay," she said. She told me things had been escalating. It started with comments about her clothes, how she looked ripe or healthy, words that sounded wrong coming out of his mouth. Then he began inventing reasons to keep her late. "He made me stay until 6 the other night," she said. "Said we had a delivery coming. Nothing ever showed up." She swallowed hard. "Yesterday I was in the supply closet getting toner. He came in and shut the door. He didn't do anything. He just stood there between me and the exit, breathing on me, asking if I was happy with my paycheck. When I squeezed past him, he pressed his hips against me. I felt a rush of anger. 'Tiffany, you have to go to the police. That's harassment. That's assault.' She shook her head so hard her ponytail swung. 'I can't. I need this job. My mom's sick. If I get fired, we lose the apartment. And he owns the place. Who are they going to believe? He's big in the local business association. I'm just a receptionist. At least quit,' I begged. 'Walk out. You're not safe there.' 'I'm looking,' she said. 'As soon as I get another offer, I'm gone. I promise.' That was the last real conversation I ever had with her. For the rest of the week, I kept a close eye on her. Jay looked on edge, pacing, snapping at the warehouse guys, but he seemed to be ignoring Tiffany. I foolishly thought maybe he'd backed off. That Friday it was pouring, one of those cold, gray Midwestern storms. At 5, everyone bolted for their cars. I waved to Tiffany at the front desk as I pulled on my coat. She was shrugging into hers. "See you Monday," she called. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Drive safe," I said. I watched her walk to her car, get in, and pull out of the lot. That was the last time anyone saw Tiffany alive. On Monday morning, her chair was empty. It was wrong immediately. Tiffany was never late. In 8 months, she hadn't taken a single sick day. By 10 a.m., everyone was whispering. I went to Jay's office. His door was open. He was behind his desk with a newspaper, calm as stone. "Mr. J," I said from the doorway, "Have you heard from Tiffany? She's not at her desk." He didn't look up right away. He sipped his coffee, folded the paper down, and finally lifted his eyes to me. "Oh, Tiffany," he said. "Yes, she called me over the weekend. She quit." I stared at him. "She quit. Personal reasons," he said flatly. "Family emergency, had to move out of state. Shame, really, she was a good typist." "She didn't say anything to me," I managed, my stomach twisting. "We're friends." "She would have told me." His eyes narrowed. His face went cold. "People keep secrets, son. Now get back to work. We have orders to fill." I walked back to my desk, my heart pounding. It was a lie, I knew it. Tiffany wouldn't just vanish without a word. And she wasn't about to move out of state on a whim with a sick mother depending on her. That night, I called her house. The phone rang and rang until the answering machine picked up. The tape was full. The next day, I drove by her apartment building. Her car was gone. I knocked on her door. No answer. I stood there on the landing, hands still on the doorknob, wanting to call the police and at the same time doubting myself. Maybe there really was an emergency. Maybe she'd panicked and fled. I was young, scared of rocking the boat, scared of losing my own job. Little by little, I convinced myself Jay might be telling the truth. 2 months crawled by. The mood in the office curdled. Jay hired a temp, an older woman who barely spoke. He became erratic, some days manic, laughing too loud at nothing. Other days shut in his office for hours with the blinds closed. I never stopped looking for Tiffany. I read the obituaries, scanned the local news. Nothing. It was like she'd evaporated. Then everything broke. It was a Tuesday afternoon in January. I was doing inventory when a black sedan pulled up outside the glass doors. 2 men in suits got out, followed by a uniformed officer. They walked straight past the receptionist and into Jay's office. His walls were glass so we could see everything. Jay shot to his feet, his face angry. He started shouting, gesturing at the door. The detectives didn't react. They spoke calmly, almost gently. I watched the color drain from Jay's face. He sagged into his chair like someone had punctured him. They stayed for an hour. No one worked. We all just watched. When they finally left, they still didn't arrest him. Jay slammed his door and yanked the blinds shut. He didn't come out the rest of the day. 2 days later, they returned. We heard the sirens first. 3 squad cars screamed into the lot, lights flashing. Officers stormed inside, kicked open Jay's door, and within seconds he was being dragged out in cuffs. He wasn't shouting anymore. He was sobbing, a grown man wailing like a child. His knees kept buckling as they hauled him to the cruiser. They taped off the building as a crime scene and sent us all home. I stood in the parking lot watching yellow tape flutter in the wind, a cold dread sinking through me deeper than the winter air. The truth came out slowly. Tiffany's mother had reported her missing about a week after she disappeared. At first, she assumed Tiffany was with a boyfriend, but when the phone stayed silent, she got scared. The police had been trying to trace Tiffany for weeks, and eventually witnesses placed Jay's car near her apartment complex the night she vanished. What came out at trial was pure nightmare. Jay hadn't just harassed her. He'd been stalking her. That rainy Friday night after she left work, he followed her. On a quiet stretch of highway near her apartment, he ran her off the road. At gunpoint, he forced her into his car and drove her to his house. Jay lived alone in a big, isolated farmhouse about 10 miles out of town. He took Tiffany into the basement. The basement was unfinished, just packed dirt and bare concrete walls. In the middle of the room stood a heavy wooden chair, bolted to the floor. Its seat and legs were stained a deep, dried brown. There were deep scratch marks in the concrete all around it, grooves where someone had fought hard. The police report said he kept her there for 3 days. When they searched his bedroom after that first interview, they found the evidence that broke him. Under his mattress was a coil of thick rope and one of Tiffany's shirts, her blood on the fabric. He confessed after they found the basement. He admitted he'd raped her repeatedly during those 3 days. When he was done, he strangled her with the rope. Then he dug a hole in the basement floor a few feet from the chair and buried her. He poured fresh concrete over the spot to hide the disturbed earth. He lived like that for weeks, sleeping in his bed above her, eating breakfast in his kitchen, coming into work every day, while Tiffany's body decomposed beneath his feet. And every morning he'd look me in the eye and calmly repeat the same lie. She'd quit for personal reasons. I quit the day he was arrested. I couldn't walk back into that building, couldn't look at the empty front desk where she used to sit. Years later, I still lie awake thinking about that Friday, about waving goodbye in the rain, about how, while I sat at home watching TV that weekend and wondering why she hadn't called, she was strapped to that chair in the dark, screaming for help that would never come. I learned something brutal that year. Monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they're just the quiet boss in the cheap suit, checking the schedule, waiting for the right moment to close the door. I don't ignore my gut anymore. If something feels wrong, I leave. Because I know now the worst things imaginable can happen to the kindest people, right in front of us, and we'll tell ourselves 100 little lies so we don't have to see it. Before we jump into the next story, if you're new here, consider subscribing and turning on the bell icon so you don't miss any of our upcoming scary tales. There's something deeply unsettling about being in a corporate office late at night. During the day, it's busy and bright, phones ringing, printers whirring, people laughing in the break room, the steady clatter of keyboards. It feels safe. But once the sun sets and the cleaning crew goes home, everything changes. The silence turns heavy. The long hallways stretch into tunnels. The dark windows reflect your own tired face back at you. I've always worked better in the quiet, so staying late never bothered me much. My name is Rachel. I'm a junior analyst for a logistics company. Our office is on the 4th floor of a pretty standard building. Open floor plan, rows of cubicles, managers parked in glass-walled offices along the edges. This happened about 2 years ago in November. It was a Thursday near the end of the fiscal quarter, so everyone was on edge. I had a mountain of data to process and decided to stay past 5 to get it done without interruptions. By 8:30 p.m., almost everyone had cleared out. The only other person left was Kevin. Kevin sat 3 rows away. He worked in IT support, late 20s, quiet. We weren't close, but we were on nodding terms. Small talk at the coffee machine, weather jokes in the hallway. He always seemed like a normal, introverted guy. That night, I could just see the top of his head bobbing over his cubicle wall as he typed. Around 9, my eyes were burning from the screen. I stood, stretched, and headed to the break room for a bottle of water. The main hallway lights had already timed out, so it was dim, lit only by the red exit signs and the glow from the city outside. Being a woman alone in a big, mostly empty building always puts you a little on edge, even if you know the place by heart. I hugged my cardigan around me and walked past rows of dark cubes. The only sound was the low hum of the HVAC. As I passed the line of executive offices, I stopped. Our branch manager, Mr. Henderson, had the biggest office at the end of the hall. He's loud and boisterous, not exactly cruel but full of himself, always making jokes at other people's expense. His door is usually locked at night. Tonight it was slightly ajar. I froze. I'd seen him leave around 4:30 p.m. lugging a golf bag. He was definitely gone. I listened. A faint scuffing sound came from inside, like a shoe sliding over carpet. "Hello," I called, my voice thinner and higher than I meant it to be. The scuffing stopped dead. No answer. My first thought was security, but our guards are hard to miss. Big flashlights, jangling keys, heavy footsteps. This sounded different. I took a few steps closer. "Mr. Henderson, is that you?" Nothing. My heartbeat picked up. Common sense said go back to my desk or call security from the front desk phone. But curiosity is its own kind of stupid. I pushed the door open. The office was dark, but the blinds were open, letting in pale light from the city. Someone was standing behind Henderson's huge oak desk. I gasped and fumbled for the light switch. The fluorescence flicked on with a harsh buzz. Kevin was there. He wasn't at the computer. He wasn't rifling files. He was standing directly behind the manager's chair. He wore blue latex gloves, the kind the cleaning crew uses. In his right hand, he held Henderson's decorative brass letter opener. Kevin looked up at me, eyes wide. He didn't move. For several long seconds, he just stared, caught. "Kevin, what are you doing?" I asked. 5 full seconds ticked by in suffocating silence. I looked from his face to the letter opener and back. He was sweaty, hair mussed, shirt untucked. Then his expression shifted. The tension drained from his shoulders and he forced out a short, nervous laugh. "Oh, wow," he said, dropping the letter opener onto the desk with a loud clatter. He peeled off the gloves and stuffed them into his pocket. "You got me, Rachel." "What?" I stayed by the doorway, not crossing the threshold. I wanted the exit at my back. "I was trying to scare you," he said. He came around the desk toward me, wearing a smile that never reached his eyes. His eyes stayed sharp, alert. "I saw you get up for the break room. I knew you'd pass by, so I was going to jump out and yell, 'Stupid prank.'" "In Mr. Henderson's office," I asked. "How did you even get in?" "The cleaners left it unlocked," Kevin said quickly, too quickly. "I just slipped in." "Come on, Rachel, it was a joke. You should have seen your face." He gave another dry, hollow laugh. "And the gloves?" I asked. He patted his pocket. "Found them on the cleaning cart. Didn't want to leave fingerprints and get in trouble, you know. On paper, none of that was impossible. Late nights get boring. People do dumb things. Maybe he really was just messing around." My gut was screaming at me. You don't put on latex gloves and stand in the dark with a sharp object just to jump out at a coworker who might walk by, I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Well, you got me. Very scary." "Yeah," Kevin said. He slipped past me into the hallway. "Hey, don't tell Henderson, okay? He'd kill me if he knew I was in here." "Sure," I said. "I won't say anything." "Thanks, I'm gonna head out. See you tomorrow." He went to his desk, grabbed his backpack, and headed for the elevators. He didn't even bother shutting down his computer. I waited until I heard the elevator ding and the doors close. Then I stepped into Henderson's office. I didn't touch a thing. The chair was slightly pulled out. The letter opener lay on the blotter. Nothing looked disturbed. I left, grabbed my purse, and practically ran to my car. The work could wait. I wasn't staying another minute. The next morning, Friday, felt off from the moment I walked in. I was late. I hadn't slept well. Kevin was already at his desk, typing quietly like nothing had happened. He looked up, gave me a small wave, and went back to his monitor. I started to wonder if I'd overreacted. Maybe it really had been an elaborate, tone-deaf joke. Around 10, Henderson breezed in, loud and cheerful as usual. I watched him go into his office. Then I noticed Kevin. He wasn't looking at his screen. He was staring over the cube wall at Henderson's door. His face was locked in an expression of pure, focused hatred. That chilled me more than anything the night before. That wasn't the face of a guy who liked pranks. It was the face of someone waiting. I tried to work, but every time I stood, I caught him doing it again, eyes fixed on Henderson's office. At lunch, I went to my car just to escape. I thought about telling someone, but what would I say? He stood in an office with gloves and a letter opener. He had explanations for all of it. I had no proof. I decided to keep my mouth shut, but I made myself one promise. I would never again be alone in the office with Kevin. The weekend passed quietly. Monday came and went. On Tuesday morning, I walked into chaos. 2 police cars were parked by the front doors, lights flashing. Inside, people clustered in tense little groups, whispering. I spotted Mr. Henderson talking to an officer, looking shaken and pale, a rare sight for him. Up on the 4th floor, security was everywhere. Kevin's desk was being boxed up. "What happened?" I asked Sarah, our receptionist. She looked terrified. "They arrested Kevin," she whispered. "Right in the parking lot this morning. They found a gun in his car." My stomach dropped. "A gun? It's crazy," she said, leaning closer. Apparently he had a whole plan, not just for protection. He was going to do it today. I sat in the break room for a long time, staring at the table. Rumors spread. Then later the police called a few of us in for statements. Eventually, we pieced together what really happened. 3 months earlier, there'd been an office party. I hadn't gone. Kevin had brought a date, a woman named Jessica he'd been seeing for a few weeks. He was serious about her, talked about proposing someday. Mr. Henderson had been drinking. In front of everyone, he made vile jokes about Jessica's appearance, said her dress was cheap, made cracks about how Kevin must be paying her to be with a guy like him. It was ugly and public. Jessica left the party in tears. About a week later, she broke up with Kevin. She told him she couldn't handle the humiliation, didn't want to be attached to his workplace. Kevin didn't explode right away. He stewed. He let it fester. The police found a journal in his apartment. He'd been planning to kill Henderson for weeks. What the detective told me during my interview still keeps me up. I described the Thursday night incident, the open office door, the gloves, the letter opener, the way he'd been standing behind the chair. The officer's expression hardened. "You said he was behind the desk?" he asked. "Right behind the manager's chair." "Yes," I said, "and he was holding a letter opener." "Yes." The officer sighed and shut his notebook. "He wasn't there to prank you," he said quietly. "We found markings on the underside of the manager's chair. He'd been loosening the bolts that hold the seat to the base. He also adjusted the tension spring." "Why?" I asked. "He wanted the chair to fail," the officer said. "But that wasn't the main plan. That night he wasn't loosening bolts. He was practicing. Practicing. He was rehearsing the motion," the officer said. "He wanted to know exactly how much force it would take to drive that letter opener through the back of the chair if Henderson was sitting in it. He was testing angles. He wanted a quick, controlled strike, something that might look like an accident or at least give him the upper hand." I felt sick. "The reason he was wearing those gloves," the officer added, "wasn't to avoid fingerprints on the cleaning cart. He'd coated the handle of the letter opener in a resin to improve his grip. If you hadn't walked in when you did, he might have waited for Henderson to sit down the next morning." Later, alone, another realization hit me even harder. When I confronted Kevin that night, he was standing between me and the only exit. He had a sharpened metal spike in his hand. He was buzzing with adrenaline and rage. If I'd pushed a little harder, if I'd tried to call security on the spot, if I'd said the wrong thing, he might not have let me leave. For 5 minutes in that dark office, I was alone with a man who had decided his life was ruined and someone had to pay. I don't stay late anymore, and I don't go looking for the source of strange noises in empty offices. You never really know what's playing out in the mind of the person 3 cubicles down. They might be typing up a report or fine-tuning a plan. This happened a few years ago, back when I was working at a huge distribution center in the Midwest. One of those endless warehouses, towering racks, forklifts zipping by, scanners beeping nonstop. The pay was decent, the hours were brutal, and the turnover was constant. I liked the work well enough. But in a warehouse, management can make or break your life. I ended up under a supervisor I'll call Brenda. Brenda wasn't just a bad boss. She was a bully, a gossip, and honestly, a horrible person. She always seemed to pick 1 or 2 people to torment until they either quit or snapped. I didn't know that walking in. My introduction to her came during my 2nd week. I was in the break area, eating a sandwich and scrolling my phone, when the double doors slammed open. Brenda stormed in, face blazing red, and marched straight up to a guy named Tony, who was just trying to drink his coffee. She started screaming in his face about a pallet being stacked wrong, cursing, inches away, spit flying. It was rage that felt way out of proportion, almost animal. Everybody else in the room stared at the table or the wall, terrified to make eye contact. Tony just shook. That should have been my cue to run, but I needed the money. Brenda's office was a little glass box right on the main floor. She did her paperwork in there and held court. She had this disgusting habit of gossiping loudly with the door open about the people she supervised. Divorces, money problems, medical issues, in full earshot of anyone walking by. It's one thing when coworkers gossip. It's another when your boss spreads your business like that. It poisoned the whole place. No one trusted anyone. My first real mistake was small. I was talking to another supervisor, a decent guy named Moral, and I casually mentioned that Brenda's open-door gossiping made me uncomfortable. I wasn't filing a complaint. I was just venting. A day later, the air changed. Brenda found out. I still don't know if Moral told her or if she was lurking around a corner. Either way, she decided I was her new target. For 6 months, my life became a slow-motion nightmare. She started with whispers and jokes. I'd walk into her office to grab a manifest, and she'd turn to whoever she was talking to, roll her eyes, and say something like, "And then there are people who think they're too good to sweep," while staring straight at me. Then she leveled up. One afternoon, I was paged to the office. As I walked in, she was on the phone and didn't see me yet. "Yeah," she said into the receiver, "the rat is coming down now." She hung up, saw me, and smirked. From then on, the rat followed me everywhere. I'd hear it hissed behind my back in the aisles. She didn't even bother to hide it. If I asked a question, she'd respond with some exaggerated sigh, like I was the dumbest person alive. When my scanner needed a supervisor override code, a thing that literally stopped me from working until she keyed it in, pretend not to hear me for 10 minutes, then write me up for time theft because I wasn't scanning. Then it got strange. One afternoon, I was in the women's locker room changing out of my safety shoes. It was just me and Brenda. I was on the bench. She was at her locker. I heard a low, guttural sound behind me. I looked up into the mirror. She was staring at the back of my head and growling, literally growling like a dog. "Excuse me," I turned to face her. She slammed her locker shut without a word and walked out. Another time, I dropped paperwork at her desk. She lifted a stack of documents and held them in front of her face like a shield. Only she didn't cover her eyes completely. She spread the pages just enough that one eye peeked through, darting around frantically while she stared at me through the gap. It wasn't just bullying anymore. It felt unhinged. The breaking point was my performance review. She called me into the office and said I needed to step it up because I was dragging down the team. "I pulled my numbers," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm the second most productive picker in the department and I have the second lowest fault rate." She gave me this dead, cold smile. "Numbers can be manipulated," she said. "Your attitude is the problem." A week later, she snapped on the warehouse floor. Right in front of 2 other supervisors and the facility manager, she started screaming at me, calling me useless. The rat, a waste of payroll. I had already told the facility manager about her behavior the week before. He just stood there, looking awkward and doing nothing. I felt the tears rising and couldn't stop them. I dropped my scanner on a pallet and walked away, hyperventilating. I was ready to quit on the spot. What I didn't know was that someone else had been watching. A quiet, older woman from packing had seen the whole thing. She went around her supervisor and called the corporate ethics line. She managed to get the regional manager, Brenda's boss's boss, on the phone. The regional manager called me on my cell while I sat in my car, crying. She asked me to explain everything and walked me through filing an official HR complaint that bypassed local management entirely. Brenda was put on final warning. One last chance. I told the HR rep, "She won't last a month." I was right. 3 weeks later, she got into a screaming match with another employee. It was bad enough that security had to intervene. She was suspended, then fired. Later, I learned she'd driven 3 people to quit before me and pushed one guy so far he got fired after he lost it and threw his work gloves in her face. I thought my nightmare was finally over. It was just beginning. About a week after she was let go, little things started happening. One night after a 2 a.m. shift, I walked out to my car. I always parked near a light pole at the back of the massive lot. My driver's side mirror was smashed inward, hanging by the wires. No note, no other damage. The angle didn't fit a passing vehicle. It looked like someone had stomped it. I tried to shrug it off. A few days later, I was on overtime. The warehouse is creepy at night. Motion sensors shut lights off in empty aisles, leaving long stretches of darkness. I was picking an order in aisle 40, way in the back, when I heard a scanner beep. I froze. I knew I was the only picker assigned back there. The night crew was mostly on the loading dock. Beep, it came from the next aisle over. Hello, I called. Moral, is that you? Silence. Then the sound of heavy boots scraping on concrete. I left my cart and walked to the end of the rack, leaning around to peer into the next aisle. It was empty. The lights were off. At the far end, near the fire exit, I saw the heavy steel door slowly swinging shut. It clicked closed. My heart pounded. I told security. They searched and found nothing. Probably a draft, they said. 2 nights later, it got worse. I got home around 2:30 a.m. I lived alone in a small rental house about 20 minutes from the warehouse, down a quiet road. As I pulled into the driveway, my headlights swept over the front porch. Something sat on my welcome mat. I stayed in the car and locked the doors. Squinting through the windshield, I could just make out a cardboard box. The tape was from the warehouse, our specific branded tape. My stomach sank. I grabbed my pepper spray and inched up the walk. The box was sealed. In thick black marker, one word was scrawled across the top: rat. The blood drained from my face. I didn't open it. I kicked it off the porch, ran inside, and locked every deadbolt. I called the police. They took a report but said there wasn't much they could do without a direct threat or a suspect I'd seen. In the morning, shaking, I went outside and opened the box. It was full of garbage. Empty coffee cups, candy wrappers, trash from the warehouse break room. Buried in the middle was a printout of my employee badge photo. The eyes had been scratched out over and over until the paper tore. I knew it was Brenda. She knew where I lived. That was the worst part. I had never given her my address. She must have pulled it from my file before they walked her out. For the next week, I slept with a chair wedged under my bedroom doorknob. It came to a head on a Tuesday, my day off. I was in the kitchen making tea. Around 9 p.m., the blinds were open. Outside it was pitch black. Inside, my lights turned the window into a mirror. I couldn't see out, but anyone outside could see in. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you won? I froze. Another text seconds later. Look outside. I dropped the phone. My eyes flew to the kitchen window. All I could see was my own reflection. I crawled to the light switch and killed the lights. The room plunged into darkness. Then I slowly peeked over the counter. A car idled across the street with its headlights off. A beat-up red sedan. Brenda's car. My hands shook as I dialed 911. She's here, I told the dispatcher. My former supervisor, she's been harassing me. She's outside my house right now. While I spoke, the driver's side door opened. The interior light didn't come on. She must have disabled it. A dark figure stepped out wearing a hoodie. She started walking toward my house. She's coming to the door, I whispered. Please hurry. Officers are about 2 minutes away, the dispatcher said. Lock yourself in a room with no windows if you can. I ran to the small hallway bathroom, locked the door, and curled up in the tub. I heard heavy steps on the wooden porch, then pounding on the front door. I know you're in there, you little rat, she screamed. Her voice was slurred, wild. Open the door, I lost everything because of you. She kicked the door. The wood splintered. The house was old, the frame wasn't strong. Each kick sounded like a gunshot. I sobbed into my hand, clutching the phone. Then I heard glass shatter. She'd moved to the living room window. Curtains tore, she was inside. Come out, rat, she shrieked. Furniture crashed, wood splintered. Heavy boots thudded down the hallway as she checked each room. She stopped outside the bathroom. I held my breath. The doorknob rattled. I can smell you, she growled. It was that same low, animal growl I'd heard in the locker room, but louder, more deranged. Come out and play. She slammed her weight against the door. The wood cracked. I screamed. She hit it again, and sirens wailed outside. Red and blue lights swept across the tiny frosted bathroom window. I heard shouting in the hallway. Police, get on the ground. Show me your hands. Brenda roared back at them, something incoherent. There was a struggle, more yelling, the metallic click of handcuffs. It took me 10 minutes to unlock the door after they said it was safe. My living room was wrecked. The window was shattered, the TV smashed, furniture overturned. A kitchen knife lay on the hallway floor, grabbed it from my counter. Brenda was arrested and charged with breaking and entering, stalking, and possession of a deadly weapon. The officers told me she'd been parking on my street for 3 nights, engine off, just watching and waiting. I quit that job 2 days later. I couldn't set foot in that warehouse again without looking over my shoulder. I moved to a new apartment complex with a security gate and better locks. I heard Brenda took a plea deal, some time in a mental health facility, a few months in jail. I don't know where she is now. I don't want to know. But sometimes at my new job, if someone raises their voice or a scanner beeps in a quiet aisle, I freeze. And every time I walk into a locker room, I check the mirrors, just to make sure no one is standing behind me, growling.